The second act of the play culminates in Macbeth's murder of Duncan. And in many ways, it begins the descent of Macbeth into violence and ultimately into madness. Beginning the psychological portion of the play, which kind of shows the ways in which both Macbeth, through having too much conscience, and his wife, Lady Macbeth, through a lack of conscience, both descend into a kind of insanity throughout the play. So Macbeth has invited the king, King Duncan, to stay at his house, at his castle at Inverness. Inverness becomes a type of hell. We see this clearly when the porter arrives knocking at the gate. He makes a reference to Inverness being hell even before the murder is known. The porter scene, I believe it's in the third part of Act 2, is very famous. Many critics have written about it, saying it's the knocking of Macbeth's conscience, etc. But I don't plan to focus too much on that. But several of the themes the porter brings up, including his jokes about sex and drunkenness, serve as kind of indictments of Macbeth for following his doing what his wives want, suspending his masculine judgment in order to obey the ambition of his wife. So you can even see in this comic scene of the porter knocking at the gates some of the themes that Shakespeare wishes to focus on in the play. So after Macbeth and Lady Macbeth hatch a plan. They will kill Banquo in his sleep. Macbeth will do the murder after Lady Macbeth has gotten the guards drunk, and Macbeth will leave the murder weapons on the guards, and the guards will be accused of the murder. When they are discovered the next morning, Macbeth immediately kills the two guards, so they have no time to speak and say, we didn't do this. So this is really when the action of the play begins. We immediately see that Macbeth is overwhelmed by this violence. He says after he murders Duncan, "Methought I heard a voice cry, 'Sleep no more.' Macbeth does murder sleep, the innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life, sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast." So from the murder of Duncan until Macbeth's death, he is in a nightmare. His life is spiraling out of control. Basically, he is being prodded on by Lady Macbeth to continue to commit greater and greater deeds of evil in order to keep power. And this, of course, teaches a great moral lesson that once you commit one crime, you must commit hundreds more in order to cover up that crime and keep your power. And this is, again, part of the tragedy of Macbeth, that he must continue to do evil even against his own will in order to keep his station and to protect his wife. Macbeth shows a tremendous amount of guilt, and you can see his psychology break down. Later, after the murder of Banquo, you will see the famous scene where he is having a dinner party and he sees the ghost of Banquo, and he rambles at the ghost, and people who are in attendance realize not only that Macbeth is psychologically disturbed, but they come to the conclusion that he is a murderer. We see this early on, this kind of psychopathology develop in Macbeth. When the porter arrives, he starts to hallucinate. He says, "Whence is that knocking? How is't with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ha! They plucked out mine eyes. With all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No. This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." So Macbeth here is saying that the amount of blood on his hands, his guilt, is so great that were he to try to wash it off in the sea, the sea would not be enough, and that the sea itself would turn red. So Macbeth will continue this kind of psychological spiral out of control throughout the play. Lady Macbeth will continue to taunt him and call him a man and call him a coward. But ultimately, even though Lady Macbeth doesn't seem to have a conscience, she too will be driven mad by the end of the play. And we will discuss and explore these scenes a little later.